This is the first episode in a two-part series, and part of our season covering unsolved homicides. This episode discusses violence, homicide, and autopsy. Listener discretion is advised. This is The Fall Line. Last October, Sheila Jones walked into the Madison, Tennessee Police Precinct. For the second year in a row, Metro Nashville Police were hosting an event called Coffee with a Cold Case, and they'd chosen the Madison Precinct as the setting. The plan was for detectives from the Cold Case and Homicide Missing Persons Unit to make themselves available for families, survivors, and to other community members. According to News Channel 5, quote, coffee and refreshments were served and people had a chance to meet the detectives, ask questions about unsolved cases, or provide information that may help ongoing investigations. Sheila Jones certainly needed help with a cold case, the 2008 murder of her 21-year-old son, Iman Cannon. But while Sheila lives in Nashville, Iman was shot and killed in Atlanta, Georgia. She knew Tennessee authorities didn't have jurisdiction. But it had always been hard to handle the intricacies of a murder investigation that was happening states away. When Iman was killed, Sheila took off work and went to Atlanta to try and find out what she could. But when she returned home, it was difficult to stay up to date on what was happening. It was rare when she could make the 8-hour round trip to Georgia. As the months and then the years passed, Sheila says that she had trouble reaching anyone at APD on the phone. It seemed like no one could tell her anything about the progress toward finding Iman's killer. So, mostly, she says, she stopped asking. By 2023, Sheila had no idea who was assigned to Iman's case. So many detectives had come and gone, and some days she considered giving up. But Sheila still wanted answers. So in October of 2023, she walked into the Madison precinct on the day of the cold case event, and she found someone to speak with. NMPD couldn't tell her about Iman, but maybe they could talk to her about homicide investigations and give her some insight. Sheila found a willing cold case detective, and they sat down to discuss Iman's case. That detective happened to be familiar with the Fall Line. After their talk, the detective suggested that, if she'd be interested in appearing on a podcast, Sheila should contact us. Sheila was willing to talk to anyone who would listen. Over the last 16 years, it's felt like very few people have. We connected that week, and we've been working on Iman's story ever since. The research hasn't turned up much. We've been unable to find any print news coverage of Iman's murder. His sister, Tanika, thinks the story may have been run on the nightly news. And a decade or so ago, the Atlanta Police Department worked with local journalists to release a short feature on Iman's case. That is still available on YouTube. His cold case is still listed on their website, too. If you dig, you can find his obituary in the Tennessee News Archives. There are still a few mentions on gun violence memorial websites. His legacy funeral page still exists, and Iman's name and burial site are noted on Find a Grave. But ultimately, there is little to mark that in the late night of May 12th, or the early morning of May 13th, 2008, someone shot Iman Cannon. His body was discovered in West Atlanta on Donald Lee Hollowell Parkway, behind his favorite night spot, Club Crucial. Sheila says that she was told that he was found by utility workers a few minutes after midnight. He'd been shot several times in the chest. Donald Lee Hollowell Parkway is a road that many locals still call Bankhead Highway, though it was renamed close to 30 years ago. The area around it is known as Bankhead, too. And if you listen to Atlanta hip-hop, you've no doubt heard the neighborhood mentioned in dozens of songs. Bankhead might be most famously known as the place where rapper T.I. grew up, along with many other Atlanta artists of note. According to Hip Hop DX, it was also where T.I. opened Club Crucial back in 2005. After moving to Atlanta, Iman Cannon made the club his regular hangout. An aspiring rapper, Iman especially liked the spot's open mic nights, and it was easy for him to make it to the club. He lived close by, and he could walk over from the apartment that he was sharing with his girlfriend. They'd moved in together just a few months before his death. In the spring of 2008, Iman was networking. After all, he was hoping to break in and make a name for himself. He told his mother, Sheila, that he'd met a producer who wanted to record with him. With that in mind, he asked her to send his notebooks, his poetry, and his lyrics down from Nashville so he could go into the studio. Sheila mailed them right away. She'd always done everything that she could to support him. She hoped that he'd finally gotten the run of good luck that they'd been praying for. Much later, when Sheila checked with the post office, she found out the package had been successfully delivered. It had arrived on May 13th, the same day her life changed, when Iman's girlfriend called her and said the police had arrived at her front door to report that Iman was dead. Iman Cannon came to Atlanta for a new start. He'd had high hopes after a 2-year prison sentence in Tennessee, and he felt he wanted to be somewhere fresh, to build new connections. Iman was only 21, and his mother worried about him being so far away. But with his sister Tanika also living in Atlanta, maybe things would be okay. And Iman had recently become more involved with religion too. Iman was Muslim like his dad, and they'd recently been spending more time together. Iman had started attending services at a local mosque, and he'd even traveled with his father to events across the Southeast. Though Iman had never lived full-time with his dad, who worked as a Metro Nashville police officer, it felt like they developed a new adult bond. Even as Iman planned his move to a new state, it seemed like a hopeful sign of new things to come. But things in Atlanta didn't go as smoothly as Sheila and Iman had hoped. They were good at first. He found work and planned to start at barber school, and when he discovered that his girlfriend was expecting a baby, he was even more excited. But after an arrest, just before Christmas 2007, Sheila feared that Iman's plans for a fresh start were over before they'd really begun. Ultimately, though, he wasn't held nearly as long as she feared, and by the spring of 2008, she was hopeful again, glad that he'd reconnected with his sister and that he was back home in Atlanta, living with his girlfriend just off Donald Lee Hollowell Parkway. He was going to concentrate on his music, he said, and he was going to plan for his son, because he was sure that his baby was going to be a boy. Iman and Sheila talked often. He told her everything, she said. He mentioned friends, talked about people he met through music, discussed issues he said he'd had with the police relating to his arrest. But he never brought up any new, serious problems. She didn't feel a sense of danger, and Sheila didn't know anyone who might have been planning to harm Iman. She still wonders to this day, was he robbed by a stranger? Did he get into an argument with someone who followed him outside the club and around the back of the building? Was this a longer-standing grudge related to music, or maybe interpersonal relationships, something he hadn't told her about? Ultimately, Sheila has to uncover the truth. To do that, she needs help sharing his case and in reconnecting with the detectives who can tell her something about how the investigation progressed in 2008 and where it stands today. Iman isn't the only victim we've covered on the Fall Line who had their own legal issues or an arrest record. That has no bearing on the need for his homicide case to be solved, or for his story to be told, or for his family to be heard. But it does affect his mother's ability to attract attention to his case. It's not a secret. When a victim has a criminal record, coverage is harder to come by. Sheila hopes that sharing his story now will help change that. She wants to reach people who may know something about the events of May 12th and May 13th, 2008. Iman died before he found out that he was right. He was going to have a boy, one who would be named after him. That's one more reason that Sheila needs to see her son's case solved. There's much more to tell you about what happened here in Atlanta, but we need to start earlier with Sheila herself. She's a Tennessee native who grew up on the outskirts of Nashville and raised 2 children from different generations. Her daughter Tanika and Iman were born 10 years apart, and though Sheila had the help of relatives, she was often doing triple duty, working, going to school, and mothering. We talked about Sheila's own childhood and how that shaped her children's lives.
Well, I was born in Franklin, Tennessee, Williamson County. It's about 18 miles from Nashville. I had a pretty good childhood growing up. My parents were very strict, because my dad being called to the ministry, becoming an elder and then a pastor, and my mother, they were very church going. I was able to go to school to a Head Start because of my dad being employed at the Peabody College campus. And that was more like a private school, maybe Catholic even. I remember the time of the segregation and they started splitting us off to go into different schools. But I was able to still stay in the school in the neighborhood which I grew up. I remember having all the family, the whole family, my mom, dad, my aunt, her husband, her children, that family home that we all grew up in, it caught a fire. So that was devastating. I recall my dad coming to the school to pick me up and to let us know that we wouldn't be going back there because the house had caught a fire. So we were all displaced for a time. And that's when we all split off. Because I remember my great grandmother and my grandmother and my great uncle all were having to share a place together. All the pictures were burned up. We all was sad about that because they had all types of pictures, baby pictures, and everything of all the children. My dad worked for the place called Boss Brothers Packing Company, and he had, two or three jobs that at some point my grandmother kept us. I do remember recalling why they worked. She kept us. She even helped me with my daughter. So as I grew up, I met my husband at a very young age. I was really a teenager. I was playing basketball. However, I become pregnant. He was 17, I was 14, and we got married. I guess our parents may have gotten together and, kind of promoted that to happen. Both families were very religious. I, you know, feel that that's what they wanted. I kept not wanting to, and actually, I just kept procrastinating the time because I know I wanted to finish school. That was one of my big goals, and I was determined if that was gonna keep me from my education, then I didn't want to do it. But I did, and everything kind of worked out okay. I was able to finish high school. I graduated from John Overton in '79. I had my daughter June the 5th of 1976. So she was 3 years old, actually. Yeah, that was a little complicated, but I did. I made the best of it as I could because I had to grow up kind of fast, learn to cook, clean, and do all these grown up stuff, which I had always grown up around older people anyhow. That wasn't too bad till as I got older, coming out of high school, it seemed like it was much harder. And I stayed in the marriage for 7 years, and then I met Iman's father. After I had divorced my ex-husband, I never got to experience growing that teenage lifestyle where you go out to parties. And I had gone to a party and then I gone to this club. And this is where I met Iman's father. He was doing security work for like all the celebrities that would come to town. Actually, the night that I met him, they had a black expo. And he was like, I remember far into a corner. So that's how we met. And coming to find out, he lived close. He lived right there in the area. We were like two streets over from each other. So we went on but we broke up. That's the crazy part about it all. We broke up and then we got back together sometime in February, probably Valentine's Day. Yep, and conceived Iman. I found out he was involved with another lady. I was really heartbroken and hurt. So I ran on off to Louisville. I don't know what really inspired me really to go to Louisville, But I just wanted to start a new life, really. I didn't really have relatives there. So I stayed there for about a year. It was very lonely. I was all alone. My daughter at the time, and he was born November the 4th. She was born 76, he was born 86. So yeah, they was literally 10 years apart. And so my mother came when Iman was born. She came up to help me. And then I think later that day, my sister may have caught the Greyhound and come. I had this, you know how women, we think, for some reason I thought it was like a TV thing. Maybe his dad is just gonna run in at the last minute or whatever and be there with me. But that didn't happen.
Sheila says that even though it was difficult, she was full of love for Iman from the very start. But with a new baby at home, she worried that Tanika wasn't getting enough attention, and Louisville was isolating. After a year, they moved back to Tennessee so that she'd have more family support.
It's hard raising when you have a 10-year-old and then you have a baby. I mean, that far apart because you find yourself navigating having to the needs of the baby. So this was funny. My 10-year, my daughter would literally get sick and I would have to take both of them to the doctor because he may be in got colic or whatever, the little baby stuff that they go through where the stomach hurt. And so, the fact that it had been so long, I'm like starting all over with this baby thing. So I take both of them. The doctor never could find nothing wrong with her. And other than probably it was emotional. And then I started thinking, well, maybe I'm not showing her enough attention because of the baby, So you having to work or, you know, do the things between. So yeah, my mom would come up during her vacation and it was a lot of help. I recall my grandmother, she was a lot of help. That's how I made it through school.
We also spoke with Iman's older sister, Tanika, who lives in Nashville now, though at the time of her brother's death, she was in Atlanta. She remembers her brother's birth and early childhood well. After all, she's a decade older. She recalls at first, the pregnancy was not discussed, but when she discovered that she had a brother on the way, she was excited.
My mom, she was kind of hiding her pregnancy initially with Iman. I guess she was waiting for a time to kind of disclose and tell everybody. But me, always being a nosy, like 9-year-old at the time, I saw some books. And I was like, well, what are these books? And the books were like prenatal stuff. And so I was really, really happy that my mom was pregnant because I was the only kid. She always used to say stuff like she felt like I had a little jealousy. I was like, no, I was thrilled. Like I was thrilled literally having someone that would look up to me. And I did feel like my brother looked up to me. And he did. He became my BFF. Like we did everything. Like the thing of you taking care of your sibling while your mother worked. I mean, he was rambunctious little kid. He was highly like always on the go, but he was my brother and I loved him.
Looking back, Sheila feels like she probably babied Iman more than she did Tanika, more than he wanted, but it was hard for her to do anything else. He was, after all, her youngest.
But I think I spoiled him. I know he was just spoiled as a boy. And he would tell me, he said, Mama, you have to let me grow up. I have to grow up to be a man. You know, it was like it was hard to let go of your children. It's almost like kindergartens. When they go off, you know how they first little year of kindergarten and they cry for you and they don't want you to leave them and then you're feeling some kind of way. So that's kind of how it was. Our relationship was very, very connected. It was nothing he wouldn't do for me, yeah.
One difference they did have early on, though, was religion. Sheila's Christian and Iman's father is Muslim. It was pretty early on, she says, that Iman expressed interest in following his father's faith. Though he never lived with his father, Iman did visit. And though Sheila saw Christianity as a source of strength in her own life, she thinks that Iman felt that she was pushing it on him.
Before Iman's death, I had just decided to surrender my life to Christ and just form a more spiritual life because the hardships in my life felt so hard. And I gravitated to being just into church. That was my way of gaining strength, the strength that I needed to carry on and to be guided because it seemed like I wasn't making a lot of good decisions. And I think at one time, Iman thought that I was trying to force the religion upon him, even. And he decided to go his father's religion. And even though he was baptized Baptist, he later on decided to become Muslim. And actually, that's where his name, his dad named him, gave him his name.
Can you tell us the meaning of his name?
Yeah, it's leader in understanding. I believe Iman meaning leader, and Atuba was meaning understanding. Yeah, I was thinking, I said, well, it is a little different, from African American or Black, the names. And I said, well, yeah, maybe I do need a name with meaning. So maybe it does fit, and I would constantly tell him about it meaning him being a leader and not to be a follower. I would just say stuff like that to him. And he was very smart.
Sheila told us that she hoped he would take it to heart, to be a leader. He'd initially done well in school and showed a strong interest in learning. Creative writing was where Iman especially excelled. Sheila and Tanika tried to encourage his interest. He had a particular attraction to poetry and its relationship to rap. Sheila said he loved to read and write and that he would spend his free time on both. Tanika told us that Iman spent a lot of time thinking, too. He was analytical, and he would often surprise her with his observations.
He was a reader. He liked to read. Very, very intellectual individual and very kind. But he stood his ground for him. He had a lot of self-preservation. That was his favorite word to use, self-preservation. He would say, Nika, you have to have self-preservation.
Iman spent more time alone as a child than Tanika had. By the time he was in upper elementary school, Tanika was a mother, and she was in her own home. Sheila was working and studying for a better career, and she says that she worried about Iman's supervision. She tried to get him involved in lots of after-school activities. She guessed that with too much free time on his hands, he might get into trouble. So when the chance came to take a job with a lot of travel involved, she considered whether he might be better off in a different environment.
At the age of 10, he was having to become more like a key latch kid. I was working 2 jobs because I was trying to transition into one good job. I was going to travel school. And that's what I really wanted to do. I was able to take a job with Con Air being an attendant. Con Air was a small airline to Delta. However, I was going to be needing to go. At this time, Iman's about 11. So I said, maybe he can go and live with his dad because his dad would always say, don't let him get too old if I feel like I can't handle, raising him. And then I thought about it. It is hard for a woman to raise a son. So maybe I just need to think about letting him go and be with his dad. And I can just go on and, make my career of being a flight attendant and, stay in travel. This is like 1999, 98, somewhere along there.
Ultimately, though, Sheila couldn't take that job. Her parents grew ill, and she needed to be close by to care for them. She decided to keep Iman home with her, too. And then, just months after, the Nashville tornado hit, an event we told you about in our coverage of the murder of Laurah Nichols back in 2020. It caused major destruction throughout the city. In the case of Sheila's extended family, homes were damaged and they were displaced again. It was even more of a struggle to juggle everything then: relocation, her parents' care, Tanika and her children's housing. Reflecting back now, Tanika thinks that Iman, who was in middle school by that point, probably had more free time than she would have liked. She wishes that he could have spent more time with his dad, but also understands that that wasn't always easily accomplished.
I think Iman probably got more freedom than me. I think it's just sometimes hard for moms to parent boys and give them a lot of structure, because I'm going through that with my own, if the father is not in the picture, because you don't know emotionally what Iman was really struggling with. I mean, he didn't see his dad there. When he did, his dad was really kind of strict because he was a cop, and he had this blended family. He had to blend.
Once they resettled, Sheila was able to arrange some special moments for Iman, especially when she moved into Nashville's hospitality industry. While she was working at one of Nashville's nicest hotels, she had the chance to meet celebrities. And because Nashville is a music town, many of those people were recording artists.
I recall I worked at the Hotel Maxwell House in Nashville. So Eminem, one of them rappers, anyway, I worked the front desk. So I could, ask, it was okay. I wanted to bring my son to hear them, whatever. And they let him come and do a little freestyle. And I remember Iman just freezing on the stage when it was time for him to go up, because he was like, this is too good to be true. I'm really up here.
Though he was too scared and overwhelmed to perform that night, the experience had a profound effect on Iman. He knew he wanted to pursue music as a career, and he redoubled his efforts to produce lyrics and to work on his voice and his style. But, according to Sheila, the distractions increased too. She thinks that he had a profound need to feel accepted by his peers, which led to poor choices. By the time that Iman hit his teens, he'd started having run-ins with law enforcement. Sheila also feels that the schools he was zoned for exacerbated these issues, because Iman was attacked more than once.
You feel like his relationships were so important for him to maintain that he would sort of go to any lengths to make sure he was still accepted in the group.
I believe so, yeah. And I mean, I tried to teach them, y'all, you don't have to buy friendship, because my daughter did the same thing. I remember my mother buying her Mickey Mouse watch, and she literally gave this watch away. So yeah, they would, and it would bother me because they shouldn't have to feel like they had to buy friendship to be, you know, noticed or be friends with somebody.
Do you think that Iman ever took the blame for friends when they had done something they were going to be in trouble for?
I really do. I think he would do that. Yeah. He probably did some stuff too, because, like I tell everybody, couldn't have been just an angel. He got in trouble. I recall going to his first high school, Antioch High School. It was so bad over there. It was a mixture of gangs and all kinds of stuff going on. And they literally broke his arm. I don't know if he got jumped getting on the school bus. All I know, I was called at work and was told that, he was injured and I needed to come and get him. And I did. The week before that, young man, I wanted to say he may have gotten killed or he was shot at.
Iman's sister Tanika had moved out by this point, and she was busy with her young children, but she still saw and spoke to Iman regularly, and she remembers being concerned about where and with whom he was associating. She wondered if being a cop's kid had something to do with his need to show that he was willing to be daring.
My mom was working a lot. He started hanging around in this community, not too far from where I live now, that it still exists. I used to tell him, Iman, I never, ever hung in Edgehill. Not saying that there are bad people over there, but I just was always kind of alone and to myself. Like, I didn't have to have that type of run-ins with people. I think when my mom started working like third shift, that's when he started venturing out because he saw that freedom, that line of freedom, and he was doing what he wanted to do. And then you ask him about it. Oh, I didn't mean to hurt anybody. I didn't do anything. It was like a thrill, like for that minute, for somebody, maybe he was trying to get the attention of his dad back then.
Sheila got Iman into a few different high schools. And then, eventually, he was sent to alternative school. But that didn't seem to help.
He was in and out of juvenile. Things were happening, that I don't know if it was following him or the friends that he kept.
Sheila tells us that Iman was eventually sent to a juvenile facility in Bradley County, Tennessee, where, she tells us, there'd already been some trouble. She recalled that there were reports of the teenagers there escaping, or incidents occurring on the grounds. She hoped that it would be better for Iman, though, because the information she was given promised a strong GED program and vocational training. She said that he was angry, and that maybe he might have felt like she'd abandoned him to the system.
I don't know if he felt that I was putting him in a position to be institutionalized, but he had brought that up at some point to me on down the road in between these places that he was having to go. And, I was trying to show him, this is what the system does.
Sheila says that Iman was incredibly unhappy while he was at that facility, which went beyond simply being in the program. He was lonely, and he was isolated, and often physically sick. All that said, she knows that the story of what happened while he was there is probably hard for people to understand. We were unable to obtain the direct records for the 2005 incident. We do have basic reports of Iman's prison time served in Tennessee, and some details later presented in Fulton Court in Atlanta, but not the whole story. Sheila's version of events is that while Iman was at the facility in Bradley County, he was sick, and for some reason during that time, he was being transported in a van. Iman told the driver that he wanted to be taken home to Nashville. When that request was not granted, which of course it would not be, he attempted to force the facility worker to hand over the van. Later, in Fulton County, Georgia court transcripts, the incident was described this way, quote, "In 2005, he was in a group home, and the group home leader was taking him somewhere, and he wanted to go home, and there was some intimidation, which amounted to the charges being filed against him. Based on this, he was arrested and convicted of attempted carjacking and sentenced to 3 years in prison. He ultimately served 2. Sheila says that Iman regretted it, and he offered an apology in court, but she understood that with his juvenile record, he'd be serving time. Sheila is not trying to gloss over the incident, which she considers a huge lapse in judgment. He was 18 at the time, and Sheila thinks that Iman finally realized how impulsive that he'd been and how serious things could get. While Iman was in prison, she focused on helping him plan for the future. When he got out, she wanted him to start over and refocus on school, work, and his passions. That and getting out of Nashville.
He was saying how he was going to change his life. I told her, Iman, don't go back to your friends, the people, because they didn't even ask about him. They wouldn't even ask where he was or anything during the time he was locked up.
When Iman was released, Sheila said that while he did briefly see his old friends, those connections seemed to head south quickly. So she was relieved when Iman started spending time with his dad and focusing on religion. She felt like that gave him some purpose.
Okay, his dad, after he got out, his dad was on his way to a big conference. They were having this big gathering in Chicago or Detroit, one of these places, and thought it was a great idea that he can get his relationship back with his dad, and all. And they were gone probably maybe about a week or so, which, that was a relief because at this time, I felt like he was serious about really changing after being locked up.
Iman's sister Tanika, she noticed the same thing, especially when Iman's habits started changing.
he was getting so serious about it. And because his dad wanted him to kind of get involved in that, he was really happy about that.
In many ways, staying in Nashville would have been good for Iman's bond with his dad, but he needed to move for other reasons. That fresh start that Sheila was so focused on, and that Iman thought he needed too. He'd already started to have issues with old acquaintances. It was better to fully cut ties. And Atlanta seemed like the obvious choice. It's been an epicenter of hip-hop for decades, and Iman felt like he had a chance of making connections in the industry in town. But he needed somewhere to live. And when you're a convicted felon, everything from job prospects to apartment rentals, they become more complex. At first, Sheila felt good about the move, because she thought she'd found safe housing for Iman. It took her months, but she discovered a program for young men, and they agreed to take him. But when Iman arrived, there were problems. Iman was 20 years old at the time, Sheila says, and no one had mentioned that that would be an issue.
And they talked about how they help young men and blah, 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 blah. So anyway, he got in there. So the people called me because he's getting ready to be 21, and these are 17-year-olds. He's become too old to be there. The guy was explaining to me it wasn't working or whatever. So I'm trying to get him to come back home with me to Nashville. I can't make him do, whatever. And I said, I'm just going to pray about this thing.
Sheila says that Iman had aged out of the program only months after arriving in Atlanta. We attempted to locate the program, but she can't quite recall the name after all these years, and we couldn't match the details with anything current. She does remember that even though he'd gotten a job at a restaurant, she was concerned that he wouldn't be able to find an apartment, and ultimately, she just wanted him to come home. But he was insistent on staying. And it didn't take him long to find a boarding house just off Donald Lee Hollowell Parkway that was renting out single rooms. The landlord was willing to work with Iman. He housed lots of other young men who were just starting out, and Iman was especially excited to be living within walking distance of Club Crucial, the spot the T.I. had opened just a few years before. There were plenty of open mic nights, and he wanted to attend and start networking. We asked Sheila about the friends Iman made at his boarding house, because he told her that he met people quickly.
Oh, yeah. He met a lot. He met one guy's birthday. Seemed like that birthday was on the same day. A lot of them had come from, I want to say, New Orleans. So I understand how they got there because, there was that hurricane hit in, 2006? Yeah, so I guess that's how he met. And Iman never would meet no strangers. That was another thing. He would literally be, friends with anybody, basically. And he met the girlfriend. He called her Princess.
Iman's girlfriend lived in an apartment near the boarding house with her young children. They'd met around the neighborhood. He didn't have a car, so he either walked or he took our public transit, MARTA, anywhere he had to go. He and Princess got serious quickly. When he found out she was pregnant, he began to look for a higher-paying job, and he also looked into enrolling in school. When he called Sheila in early December of 2007, things were looking up. He'd gotten an offer to work at a construction company, and he planned to start at Barber College. It seemed like the fresh start they'd both prayed for had finally come.
He was trying to start his life and be productive, and he wanted everybody to be proud of him, He said, Mama, did so-and-so ask about me. Tell everybody I love them. He would always want to say he loved you. That's how we would end our conversation. Mama, I love you. And I tell him I love him. And to keep his head up, that was his favorite word, keep your head up. And that's when I think things went sour.
Next time on The Fall Line, we continue the story of Iman Cannon and the events that led up to his murder, which remains unsolved to this day. If you have any information regarding the cold case homicide of Iman Cannon, please call Atlanta Crime Stoppers at 404-577-TIPS or 8477. Tips can result in a reward of up to $2,000. You can also anonymously submit your tip. www.crimestoppersatlanta.org. If you know of a case that should be covered on the Fall Line, there's a link to our case submission form in the show notes. Thank you for listening. The Fall Line is an independent podcast, and we appreciate listener support. It allows us to do research, obtain FOIA, pay our content advisors, and support and donate to the causes we care about. If you try out the products we advertise, please use our sponsor codes. It really helps. And please take a moment to rate and review our show in your podcast app of choice. My book, Lay Them to Rest, which covers years of my life working on a Jane Doe case and the world of forensic scientists who resolve unidentified persons cases, is out everywhere now as hardcover, ebook, and audiobook, read by me. You can order it anywhere you get books and through your local library. Find out more through the link in our show notes. If you'd like to support the show and the stories we cover, join us on Patreon or Apple Premium. 100% of our Patreon and Apple Premium earnings are supporting our Family Therapy Fund and actively paying for therapy for families who've appeared on our show. On Patreon, you can get early release, ad-free versions of our regular episodes for $5 a month. If you prefer Apple Premium, you can subscribe there as well. On Patreon, we also post occasional giveaways, updates, and blogs, which all patrons can enjoy starting at just $1. The Fall Line is written, hosted, and researched by Laurah Norton, with additional research assistance by Brian Waters. Interviews by Brooke Hargrove. Produced, engineered, and scored by Maura Curry. Content advisement by Brandy C. Williams and Vic Kennedy. As always, our most special thanks to Liz Lipka.